to watch your dad get killed and wet your memory.
Hi, Patrick.
Hello.
Hey, Patrick.
Good evening, Patrick.
Good evening. You won't see me for long. I'll pop, well, anyway.
We'll get started in pretty shortly here. Give Councilor Arroyo a minute or two.
Hey, everyone.
Hey,
Hello.
Xavier.
okay. Looks like we have a full crew this evening, and my clock shows 6:30. Let's start on time for once. Good evening, everyone. I'm hereby calling this May 25th meeting of the Council of the City of Lancaster to order. Mr. Harris, would you be so kind as to call the roll of members?
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Arroyo,
Here.
Ms. Beke,
Here.
Ms. Craig,
Here.
Ms. Diaz,
Here.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Here.
Mr. Soto,
Here.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Here. Next, we have approval of the minutes for the May 11th, 2021 meeting. I'll hear a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Council comments. Hearing none. Mr. Harris.
Mr. Arroyo,
Aye.
Ms. Beke,
Aye.
Ms. Craig,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
Mr. Soto,
Aye.
and President Smith-Waddell.
Aye. All right. Proclamations, honors, awards, and resolutions of recognition. Do we have any, Mr. Harris?
We do not, Mr. President.
Thank you. That brings us to the first public comment period, reserved for those persons who have contacted the city clerk prior to the meeting. Has anyone contacted you, Mr. Harris?
They have not, Mr. President.
Okay. Reports requested by council or interim reports of committees of council. Do we have any, Mr. Harris?
We do not.
All right. That brings us to our legislative agenda, where we begin with the Heritage Conservation District. Mr. Harris?
Yes, Mr. President. Considering the following application and recommendation from the Historical Commission for improvements to a property within the Heritage Conservation District, we have one this evening. Royersford Gardens, LP, owner of 10 South Prince Street, propose alteration of a storefront to create an elevated open terrace facing West King Street. And that was recommended for approval by the Historical Commission.
Okay. I'll hear a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Councilor Craig.
Applications involving demolition have customary been discussed first by the Community Planning Committee during council's monthly committee meeting. The work proposed in this application entails alterations of a center bay on a long elevation on a relatively modern building, not demolition of an entire structure. I don't have much more to say about that unless there's somebody else that wants to add. I don't know if Suzanne is available, if she wants to add something.
Is there a, oh, there we go.
Possibly Douglas. You're
Mr.
muted,
Smith, you're
Douglas.
muted.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors, and good evening, Mayor. I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about the project, but don't have anything in particular to add. This was a unanimous vote in favor of this recommendation to council.
I have no questions. Are there any questions from the committee? Council as a whole? Questions from the public? Going. Gone. I don't think there are any questions, Douglas.
Great.
Okay, well, hearing no public or council comments, Mr. Harris.
Mr. Royo,
Aye.
Ms. Beke,
Aye.
Ms. Craig,
Aye.
Ms. Diaz,
Aye.
Mr. Garcia Molina,
Aye.
Mr. Soto,
Aye.
and President Smith Waddell.
Aye. All right. I believe that brings us to ordinances for first reading. Administration Bill number 12, 2021. Mr. Harris.
Yes, Mr. President. An ordinance of the City Council, of the City Council of the City of Lancaster, amending Section 67(5)B of the Code of the City of Lancaster to remove the application of seniority points for promotions within the Police Bureau, amending Section 42(7)G(3) to remove the application of seniority points for promotion within the Fire Bureau, providing for the repeal of inconsistent ordinances, providing for the severability of the ordinance, and providing that the ordinance shall take effect in accordance with the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. As this is a first reading, there's no action to be taken, but are there any comments from members of council before we turn it over to the staff that may want to comment? Okay, I believe we have both the police and fire chiefs and both the police and fire bargaining union presidents here. So we will start with any members of administration staff who wish to address council on this matter, and then we can go to Mr. Stone and Owens. I'll start with you, Chief Little. What you got?
Thank you, Council President. Good evening, Council. There are many different opinions on the use of seniority points during the civil service promotional process. But as city administration and leadership, we do not feel the length of service in and of itself makes someone qualified. There needs to be an appropriate mix of experience, training, and education. City ordinances already established a minimum number of years of service for the various promotional ranks. Accordingly, seniority is already accounted for in the determination of a candidate's eligibility for promotion. In closing, the Lancaster City strategic plan of sound government, goal number 1, is creating a culture that attracts talented, motivated individuals who reflect the importance and employment of public service. Any questions, Council?
Well, that was a very succinct and direct statement, Chief Little. Sorry, I think you caught us off guard. You were so brief, and brevity indeed is the soul of wit. Yeah, I think you caught us a little bit off guard with in closing. But no, thank you. Thank you for that. Councilors, any questions for Chief Little, and then I will ask Chief Bay to weigh in.
Chief Little, if I may, Council President.
Please.
Could you elaborate for the Fire Bureau what the length of service requirements are to be considered for promotions? Just number of years of service before those can happen that are already in place?
Yes, Counselor. So initially, right off the bat, you have to have 5 years of service to the city to even test for the rank of lieutenant. And then as you promote, it's 2 years time and grade at that rank. So we have lieutenants, captains, battalion chiefs. So it's 2 years time and grade minimum in that seat before you can test to the next promotional rank.
Thank you very much. And I'll ask the same of Chief Bay after I know he probably has remarks. I'll have the same question then.
Councilor Soto, did you have a question for germane to what Chief Little had to say?
No, I do not.
Okay, excellent. Chief Bay, would you like to weigh in?
Good evening, Council. It is equally important that the Police Bureau is aligned with the mayor's strategic goal of equity and inclusion. Eliminating the 5 seniority points moves the Bureau in that direction. Creating lists of applicants for promotion in which added benefits are given to candidates with seniority points limits the ability of less senior, but perhaps more qualified candidates to move into management. Years of service are but one factor that the mayor and I should consider when looking at selecting a candidate from the list of 3. Seniority points are not a matter of right. Promotion is not an entitlement. Eliminating seniority points assures that all candidates who meet the minimum qualifications for promotion are given an equal opportunity to be selected. Eliminating seniority points is not just good management, it is good human practice and is consistent with the city's desire for equity, diversion, and inclusion in the promotional process. And finally, eliminating seniority points assures that the most qualified people are put in management positions where their management and leadership has a direct impact on the safety and lives of not only our co-workers, but our city residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Bay. Well, we'll start with Councilor Bakay.
Yeah, same question for you, Chief Bay. If you could just describe the minimum years of service before qualifying or being eligible to be promoted within the Bureau of Police.
Yes, ma'am. It's 5 years.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Garcia Molina.
Thank you, Chief Bay, for your statement and for your commitment to equity work. This is a question and you might not have the answer to, but perhaps you could email us or next time you meet. I'm interested to see in the past, let's say 5 years worth of promotions, how many times seniority points really played a factor in the decision-making process. I'm sure you don't have the data in front of you, but if you don't mind following up with that, that'd be great.
You're right, I don't, but I do have Captain Fry should be on the call here, who I've asked to join in to provide a historical perspective.
Great, thank you.
Is he there?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, Ms. Trazo?
Did you say that Captain Fry should be on the call?
Yes.
I'm not seeing his name, but there is.
A TF382.
Yeah.
Captain Fry, if you are on, could you please click the raise hand button?
Oh, okay, perfect.
That's him?
Yeah, I'll add him in.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Captain.
Don't ask me why it has that task force 382nd up there. I have no idea. So just to back up a little bit, to be eligible to take the sergeant's exam for the Lancaster City Bureau of Police, you have to have 4 years of service to be eligible to take that. Then to take the lieutenant's exam, you have to have 2 years of service as a sergeant. So what I can give you is 2020 stats for our seniority points. In 2020, we had 7 sergeants pass the lieutenant's exam. Out of those 7, 6 of them qualified for the max seniority points of 5. And there was 1 of the 7 that received 3.5 points. So you can see for the lieutenants, because of their years in service, by the time they are eligible to take the lieutenant's test, they almost all are going to be very close to maxing out on the 5 points to begin with. For the sergeants, we had 8 officers who passed the sergeant's test. One of those people maxed out at 5 points, one at 4.5 points, one at 4 points, one at 3.5 points, one with 1 point, 2 with a half point, and 1 with 0 points. So that should just give you a general idea how it breaks down for everybody.
Thank
Really
you.
appreciate that. Do you mind, I'm not going to make you repeat all the numbers, forwarding me that information in terms of the data and how it broke down point wise?
Absolutely.
Great. And then if it's possible, backtracking a little bit so that we get a bit of that trend, that would be perfect.
Yep, I can do that.
Appreciate it.
Do any other counselors, thank you, Captain Fry. Do any other counselors have questions or comments for Chief Bay or Captain Fry while he's still on the meeting? Going once, going twice. Okay, gentlemen, thank you for that. Stick around if you are able and willing. And it's my presumption, that both Mr. Stone and Mr. Owens would like to comment. Since we started with Chief Little, I'm going to go ahead and start with Union President Stone. Jeff, you can go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you, President Waito. Thank you, council members. I know I've had a couple conversations with you guys, and if I haven't had a conversation with you, I apologize. I had a busy schedule, but I've been able to talk to the body, and I have an overwhelming support in saying that the body feels that the seniority points should stay the way they are. To them, seniority matters, especially when it comes to experience. I'm also in the process of taking the promotional exam, and when you do read the promotional books, it harps on experience. And you're not going to get experience by just coming on here, reading a book, and taking a test. Everybody feels like with experience, you learn from past calls and decision making, and that's why seniority matters to us. There's been an issue in the fire department raised about favoritism. We feel that if you take the seniority points away, it's going to raise that issue even more. And as far as diversity and inclusion, I understand that's the city's big push, and we want to help out. But as far as a blanket policy for both departments, we are 2 separate entities. The Public Works is a separate entity, so one policy does not work for everybody. I mean, we're willing to come to the table and bargain, which we feel that's how this should be handled. And at the end of the day, we're hoping that's what's going to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Stone. Counselors? Okay. Mr. Owens, Steve.
Good evening. Can you
Good
hear
evening.
me? Excellent. Hey, thank you for the time. I appreciate the time this evening to talk about this. As the president of the Police Officers Association, I conducted a survey to see where our membership stood on this issue. 85% of our membership support leaving the ordinance as it stands. They understand that seniority is experience, and in public safety, experience goes a long way towards a successful resolution. An officer that's seen multiple critical incidents throughout his career, he's had an opportunity to see what works, to see what didn't work. He's already got a map in his mind of how to direct a critical incident towards a successful resolution. I understand the desire for equity and diversity, but at the end of the day, our primary responsibility is the public safety, and we need to put the person with the most experience and the best chance at a successful resolution in a position to end a critical incident with the best results for the community, the officers, everyone involved. And the best way to do that, in our opinion, is to maintain those seniority points that'll separate candidates that are close in the testing procedure. Beyond that, I also believe that when you look at community relationships, the longer time that you've been in the community, the more time you've spent out on the street with the community members, the more relationships you should have built in that time. And that's an important factor in police work as well. So, like I said, as far as the Police Officers Association and our membership stands, we believe that these seniority points are an important part of the promotional process. Thank you for your time this evening, giving us an opportunity to express our opinion on this.
Thank you, Steve. So, counselors, this is the first reading. You will not be voting tonight, but this is the opportunity to ask any questions. As many people sort of qualified to weigh in on this are here, as are likely to be in one place for some time. So please take the opportunity. I see Councilor Garcia Molina's hand, please.
Thank you, Council President. So Steve, just a follow-up. I appreciate you taking the time to survey your team. When you say 85% feel this way, how much of the police department itself is that 85%?
The LCPOA is made up of every officer from the rank of police officer 1 through lieutenant. We had about 83 members participate in the vote.
Great. That's what I was looking for. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, sir.
May I make a comment?
Yes, Chief.
Well, we can't discount experience in our profession. It goes a long way. I think there's a distinction between management and experience, and certainly an experienced manager is ideal. Not everyone with a certain tenure on the job makes them a good manager or a good leader. And I think that if we're going to consider experience in a promotional process, that experience will be vetted in the interview process. That's the interview process is the ideal opportunity for the candidate to expound on their experience and relate their experience in the city and the police department to their management and leadership skills. That's where it marries up. That's where it's considered, and that's what should set them apart from their the other candidates. The mere fact that a person has X amount of years more than another person does not a leader make. It just means that they've been on the job longer. And you have to look at the totality of their career, not just the fact that they have tenure on a person. When we're considering people for promotion, it looks at the total person concept, everything about them, not just seniority. And in some cases, that seniority provides an unfair advantage because just for the mere fact only that they have more time on the job than somebody else. Thank you.
You're muted, Council President. I'm gonna just go.
Thank you.
Council President, I have a question, if I may.
Yeah, I think I saw Councilor Arroyo first, and then I'll go to you, Councilor Diaz, and then back to you, Councilor Garcia Molina. Jamie?
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief Bay, you may have answered this, but I'd be curious to hear the other perspectives as well. The common theme that I keep hearing is experience, that this is kind of what's on the line at the moment. But I'm curious as to how we define experience, because are we only equating experience as a number of years? Are there other factors that go into experience when it comes to promotion in the two different departments?
Well, for the police department, that 5 points equates to years on the job. And again, it's the oral presentation of their experiences during that time frame that should set them apart from a younger candidate. When we talk about experience, we're talking about a variation of calls, how it was handled, their leadership skills demonstrated during these various times that they're talking about. We're talking about, experience in training and just overall career variances. not just simply because you have X amount of years on a job, where a person may have just sat in a particular position for X amount of years, did no forms of self-improvement in terms of education, training, or anything. They just was there. They showed up every day, went out on patrol, and because they now have a X amount of years on a job, now all of a sudden they're experienced. So to me, that doesn't hold water. That's not a good enough reason to promote somebody. It's just not. It shouldn't set them apart from a younger, more qualified, more educated person who comes across in the interview, able to articulate their experiences and their education and their leadership skills in various situations. And so that's where we stand with these 5 points. They're just not. It's a sense of entitlement, just because you have years on a job.
Councilor Diaz.
Curious to know in regards to, I know how certain unions have, well, actually, that I know of, since I was in a union for many years, seniority always counted. So looking forward, and I'm not sure if the wording can be changed, if there could be agreement to that, whereby anyone that is going to be hired from here on, that their position would have to be without points, according to what you're saying, instead of receiving the 5 points. Do you follow me? Maybe Ishmael, you probably can understand what I'm trying to say.
I believe, Councilor Diaz, that what you're proposing is an adjustment to the proposal wherein seniority points would carry forward for existing firefighters, but at some point a cutoff would be, or existing firefighters and police officers, at some point a cutoff would be determined, and it would no longer apply to promotions of newer firefighters or past a certain date, essentially to grandfather them in. Is that what you're proposing, Councilor Diaz?
Yes, thank you.
I'm not sure to whom that was directed specifically, but it seems like
I would direct that possibly to is it Chief Stoner or Chief Stone or?
So there's Chief Little, who's our fire chief, of course. And then
I would say both could answer that question because, well, I'm gearing it more toward the union, but maybe, Chief Little can weigh in on that as well.
I can talk a little bit too.
It sounds like she wanted to hear from you, Jeff.
All right. Well, I mean, like I said, the union's open to bargain because we obviously think there's other issues with the promotional process. Even like Chief Bay was talking about the oral interview. The oral interview is very subjective. Like there's no operational questions in it. So there is a lot of things that are wrong with it. I mean, the fire chief gets to pick the 3 people that sit on it. So, I mean, there are a lot of things that we feel that could be changed, which we'd love to bargain with, but we don't like the fact that, the administration wants to just unilaterally just change it without us being involved. And talking about the 5 points, the chief says they're so huge, but at the end of the day, in the past 3 years, we have skipped multiple people with the rule of 3. So they have the choice to skip people. It's not like they have to promote number 1.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Jeff. I want to make sure I get to returning to Councilor Garcia Molina.
Appreciate it. So my question was for Chief Bay, and it's more just for my learning process. So when it comes to those that are sitting on the tab, like the interviewers, how are they selected within the police? And kind of what does that process look like?
I'm going to let Captain Fry speak to that. I've not sat on a board or convened one at this point in my career. So Cap, if you could address that, please.
Thank you.
Sure. So typically the oral board, the way it's set up, there's 3 captains in the police bureau. So it would be the 3 captains, and then we normally have an outside chief that's involved in the process. And the outside chief can be any chief, whether it be a local police department or far away, or whatever the case may be. However, that's something we were looking at trying to alter moving forward anyway. So, but that's typically how it's done.
Got it.
And of course, there's score sheets. There's basically a schematic that lays out per the question. It ballparks what the points are, so that gives everybody who's doing the rating, an idea of where to score.
Got it. Who is selecting the outside chief? And is that rating scale that is utilized by the interviewer something that is standardized, or is that something that we implement?
So recently we have implemented that.
Okay.
Typically in the past, I believe that the police chief was the one that selected the outside chief to come in for the interview.
Perfect. And then to go off of Jeff's point, for the police department, are we also able to strike those from the ranking in order to choose, say, person 4 instead of 3?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all my questions, Council President.
Yes, sir. Councilor Molina, that's known as the rule of 3.
Okay.
If you're familiar. And so, yes, so the top 3 candidates, we can choose 1, 2, or 3 for promotion.
I appreciate it, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Counselors, not that this is the last word on any moment. While people are here, I see you, Mr. Hopkins. Do you have any other questions for anybody that's present right here before we move forward? Because primarily this is a forum for you to ask questions and deliberate with this first reading. Okay, Mr. Hopkins.
Yes, thanks, President Smith-Waddell. I wanted to address a few of the comments and questions that were made regarding, regarding the 5 seniority points, but wanted to back up a little bit and make sure that all the counselors are aware of sort of the different buckets of issues, if you will, and which ones are bargainable issues and which ones are issues that can be implemented through this process, changing the civil service regulations for whether they're seniority points or several years ago when we added second language capabilities, things like that to the number of points that one can earn for the promotional process. So Jeff Stone, the president of the IFF Local 319, talked about they'd be happy to sit down and negotiate some of these things. Anything that is related to the civil service hiring or promotional process is not a bargainable issue. So this is something that we can, as we proposed here, take through a ordinance change, bring it to City Council, and implement that change based on the leadership of both the police department and in this case the fire department of what is best for the organization overall, both the police department, the fire department, and the city of Lancaster. The bargaining units, which I've sat and negotiated both contracts and other issues with both Jeff Stone and Steve Owens. Their role in their role is to be the voice of their membership. The role of the union is to support their members in pay and benefits, defend, if there are issues of disciplinary action, to defend their members in those disciplinary actions. But the role of the police chief and the fire chief is to determine what is the best way forward for the organization as a whole. That is not the bargaining unit's position. right? That's not their, that is not their role in this overall process. And that's part of why this process of the promotional points can be taken through city council and is not a bargainable issue. Because this really is, promotions are one of the most important aspects of the overall organizational direction of both of the police and fire bureaus. So I just want to make sure that that distinction was understood. The other piece, and it goes to Councilor Diaz's question about sort of grandfathering in a set of certain officers or certain firefighters and then changing things after new ones are hired. That is a pretty typical process that we go through when we're negotiating bargainable issues in the contract. Both the Police and Fire Bureau had a different set of wage rates for officers hired after, I think it's 2011, and firefighters hired after 2012. They have a different pension and post-retirement medical benefits for the newer officers and newer firefighters. So that is pretty typical on the negotiation side of things. On the civil service promotional side of things, I certainly have to talk about this with the solicitor. I don't see how that would be a workable solution. You really have to have one set of rules for everybody in the police bureau and everybody in the fire bureau as to how promotions are run, because you could over time run into a circumstance where you have somebody who came in at after next week, say, and they would have a different set of point options in front of them versus somebody who was hired 4 weeks before them. And that really doesn't make sense functionally within either bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Real quick, I think we've done council comments and questions. Is there anyone who is a member of the public who would like to speak to this matter that is not already represented here? Mr. Dastra. Tony, you know the drill.
Tony Dastra, 700 block of New Holland Avenue. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. So I forget the gentleman's name. I believe it was Mr. Stone who actually used the word favoritism. And I think that's a very valid concern for the bargaining union to have. Recently, I've talked to a few community members and they're concerned, they're just concerned that there is a favoritism mentality, but that's not the word they used. I am being a little polite by saying favoritism mentality. And I think this correlates a little bit to things like political patronage and the Shachtman decrees of Chicago in the 70s. With community members having this concern and the bargaining union using that word favoritism, I think that's important to highlight. But overall, I'm really split personally, especially as a young person who is often told I'm unqualified for certain things. I can let you extrapolate what those things are, but I have concerns about this. I personally think at this point in time, if we're going to try this sort of getting rid of seniority, I'd like to see it done with the police, but not the fire department. I've spoken to someone I love in the past and said that, you know, these two entities are similar in the sense they both put out a type of fire. One's a chemical fire, another is a social fire. And I, especially today being the year anniversary of George Floyd's murder by Derek Chauvin, I think there are some changes throughout the nation that need to be done in the police departments. And I think getting rid of seniority points would be a way to highlight changes to be made. Thank you for the timer. And I would like to see this change potentially done for the police department, but not the fire department. Like fire department, firefighters are chemists. And I do believe that each experience empowers them more and more with knowledge to better put out these fires quicker, especially with the changes needing to be implemented in police departments throughout the country. I'd like to see younger people have more of an edge to get ahead in police departments because we talk about the Derek Chauvin murder, George Floyd murder. And a point that we hear is how the other officers present were young. They weren't senior to Derek Chauvin and potentially would have acted if they had more competence. I'm not gonna debate any of those points, but what I do think is that we all know something wrong happened to George Floyd. There are things police departments can do to better themselves throughout the country. I support personally at this moment in time getting rid of seniority for police departments, given the overall society's context. But given what Mr. Stone had said, I apologize if I'm misattributing, but I think those concerns are valid and I think they need to be heard. And don't do this to both departments definitely right now. I would encourage you to focus on the police department, if anything. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tony. Are there any other members of the public, anyone on the meeting who would like to make a comment at this time? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Owens, Mr. Stone, Chiefs Bay and Little, Captain Fry. Thank you very much for weighing in on this. We will be back on this item in June as conversations continue. Thank you for your time. All right. That brings us to our second public comment period. Now, this is open for comment for issues not already addressed on the agenda. Start with your name and where you live, and your comments are limited to 3 minutes. Mr. Dastra.
Hello again, Tony Dastra, 700 block in New Holland Avenue. This was on the agenda, but I'm hitting a point that's separate from the actual approval of the item because I was at that meeting and I knew about it. Seems like a pretty good plan that's going to add some units without totally destroying a space. I think the conversation is actually about how a raised part of the building because a grade doesn't exactly meet on street level depending on your perspective. But besides that, my public comment is definitely a continuation of something I've said in the past. We need to get all these meetings recorded and live streamed. Well, they're already live streamed via Zoom, but we definitely need to get these meetings recorded. This project specifically isn't insanely, it's not going to have the greatest ramifications on the overall area. It is important and it will have ramifications, but it's not as big as some projects we see. I think, and you know, I used to live stream the historical commission meetings. It was one of the meetings that was consistently live streamed and recorded to the public via See-Through City. I would like to see that return. I understand that sometimes you need time to scale things, but I believe the technologies are available, and I don't like hearing the argument that there are legal issues with doing this. I understand that there are legal challenges and concerns with what constitutes minutes, what supports minutes. But, you know, we do this thing for city council, and there's been a workaround for this. I truly believe it's not too complex or difficult to get this going for the other meetings. I don't even know what to really say, because I think some of you even agree with what I'm saying, but it obviously needs to happen as a collective whole from city government to see these things change. We need more support to get information to the public. I understand the public is also, there's a level of responsibility incumbent on them to access information, but given the world we live in and the fact that people can't always attend a meeting at a specific time, I think it prevents people from participating in public meetings. And it's really frustrating because I remember when I was opposing at one point the 101 North Queen demolition, because I had concerns when I was younger about the project. I think it's going well, but I still had concerns. I remember a council person who is no longer a council person for good reason. that might be taken wrong, but they're no longer on council. I remember being told that the meeting already happened, it was already discussed, and basically my points were coming way too late. I felt slighted in that moment. I was really upset. And I'm sure there's other members of the public who come to meetings expecting to be able to make their point, but I don't ever want anybody else to be told what I was told, which is why weren't you at the meeting? They should be able to see it. Thank you for your time again. You guys have a good night. See you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Dastrup. All right, any other public comments? All right, hearing none, I believe that moves us to the report of the mayor. Mayor Sirachi.
Good evening, councilors. Thanks for the time tonight. 1 year ago, George Floyd's tragic murder catalyzed a shift in the nation's consciousness surrounding police brutality and the immense efforts needed to advance racial equity. While many of our Black and Brown neighbors have lived in this awareness, white folks have had much reflection and education to do. And this moment calls on institutions like the City of Lancaster to look inward and continue to change policy and practice. And this was part of our conversation tonight, and I appreciate that. Members of the executive leadership team 2A1 have taken up this work to fulfill our vision of a stronger, more equitable city, Black by Black. And a lot of work has been done. A lot of more work is in progress, and even more work remains. As many of you know, last June, the City of Lancaster released a list of equity commitments announcing new changes and summarizing past actions dedicated to equity. In December, the city released another progress report across all of our departments. And for those that are listening in, you can take a look at these reports at cityoflancasterpa.com/equity. And we'll be working on another update later this summer. And while this work continues, others have also picked up the pace of their efforts in our community. And for this, I'm really grateful. And I believe that collectively, we'll be hearing more about these efforts as the weeks and months roll on. However, I do fear that as the days fade and time grows between the death of George Floyd and the collective consciousness that very tragic murder raised in our community, that the sense of urgency will also fall away. And I guess this is just, as a moment and a point in reflection that I'm reminded that while the arc of the universe may bend towards justice, it doesn't bend on its own. And I look forward to continue to working with all of you in that effort. Thank you.
I have no report this evening, which brings us to council comments. Councilors. All right. Hearing none, I will then hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Right. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good evening.